Hello, friends. I'm Holly Elissa Bruno, and almost 4 years ago, I wrote a book called Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. And one of the people, I'm about to invite her to join us, one of the people who was at the very first sessions about this book will be with us again today. She's a great teacher, and her name is Denice. And she has introduced a topic that is pretty powerful. I'm hoping she can. I think I just let you in, Denice. If not, try again. Anyway, the topic we began to talk about last week is a powerful one. And it has to do not only with, hey, girlfriend, good to see you. Welcome. Hey,
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're there. How's your soul?
Good.
Right. Mine is too. Mine is too. So I'm just letting folk know, inviting them to join us on a journey today, looking at how do we see ourselves as trauma survivors? Do I see myself? Do you see yourself as a person who's wounded? Do you see yourself as a person who is otherwise able? Do I see myself as a person who's got incapacities that I have to overcome? Or do I simply see myself as who I am, the whole mix all together? And yet at the same time, when put in the context of the law, in this case, the Americans with Disabilities Act law, do I have to redefine myself to get help or at least to apply for help? So, excuse me while I take care of myself. That's our topic. And last week, I was just delighted to see Denice here. Denice has been a teacher for decades, a Head Start teacher for decades, and she's gifted. She's really gifted at touching each child, at where the child lives, and helping the child see, wow, I've got something to offer. I didn't really know I had something to offer, but I met this sort of crazy teacher, Denice, and she said, yeah, I love you, stinky face. So Denice has been through her own journey in the last couple of months, and just going to ask you, Denice, do you would you like me to introduce what's going on, or do you want to just summarize for us what's going on with this challenge you've got about how you need to define yourself from the outside?
Yeah, well, I was planning on working at my job for another year and before retiring, but something interrupted that, random drug test. And so,
Let me just stop you right there, sweetie, because everybody listening from all around the world might be going, "Oh man, she's a druggie," or "Oh man, what's she doing?" Can you just give us some background on why you medicate and how
yeah,
you medicate?
yeah, I use marijuana after work, not during work. And I tend to be hyper vigilant and very full of anxiety. And so when I get home from work, out of the rigmarole, I come home and take a couple puffs of marijuana, and it calms me down and it allows me to not review the entire day a million times, thinking of all the alternatives that I could have done better. Basically, is how it helps.
I hear you, and that one of the terms for what you just described is called perseveration, where I, as a trauma survivor, keep going back over, underneath, back around, every which way. Oh my God, how did I ever do that? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I think of that? Women, the research says, can you believe this, Denice? Women tend to second guess ourselves more than men. Why?
Yeah,
Any
well, we're
any sense
doubted.
about? Yeah,
We're
say more about
doubted in our
that.
culture. Patriarchy kind of makes us feel that way.
Right. It's like, wait a minute. I don't know what's true here. There's even There's even a,
But also abuse,
yeah,
it's an abuse symptom, I guess. What could I have done better? How could I have kept myself safer? Maybe. I don't know.
no, you do know. And I want to congratulate you for that because that's another part of being a survivor. If when a child, and I do write about this in the book because it would just really needs to be said. If I'm a child and I'm beaten, or I'm a child and I'm turned into the whole caregiver for the whole family, which you and I ended up doing, and or I'm getting smacked around regardless, or no one cares that I'm there. I only matter if I can accomplish certain things for them and keep the secrets. The thing that is natural for children to do is to blame ourselves. Must be my fault. Mama doesn't love me. Must be my fault that father does these awful things to me at night. Must be my fault that I'm getting hit because I gotta have done this wrong. And what I've come to realize in my own case as a survivor is that self blame made it possible for me to survive emotionally because if I had held my father accountable for what he was doing to me, I don't think my little heart as an infant, a toddler, I don't think I could have survived the abandonment, the crashing abandonment that I would have felt by realizing this man who's supposed to love me and take care of me is hating me and he's abusing me. I don't think my little child soul could do that. So it became easier for me to blame myself than it was to hold him accountable. When I got older, then I could say, I hold you accountable. I hold you
Right.
accountable. But I couldn't do that as a kid. It just would have been overwhelmed my world. He was the person that allegedly kept me alive, fed me, put a roof over my head, and at the same time disowned me, sexually molested me. It was very confusing. Does that make sense to you that in any way, Denice, that we would have blamed ourselves, like we're talking about self-doubt,
Right.
second
Yeah.
guessing?
Yeah, I blamed myself.
Yeah. And how did you ever get out of that?
Um, I don't know. I guess
The
maturity.
process.
Yeah,
Say what?
maturity,
Yeah.
you know, I would have became more realistic because I moved away from my family to the other side of the country for 34 years. So I could operate with different eyes. Or
So some people call that the geographic cure, where if we move far enough away, we don't have to face the continuous reminders of who
right,
we are not. And yet we take with us inside of ourselves some of the garbage from that.
right. The incorrect beliefs that we have about ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah. So I can get it. I mean, I've tried the geographical cure too, and it has certain great possibilities in
Yeah,
it.
it was
And you get
great.
that.
It was very beneficial. And, I believe the best education is travel. So I moved a lot. And now I moved back to, well, in 2012, 2011, I moved back to the Midwest because I was like, I'm working with families all the time. I really should probably work with my family. So I came back to check it out.
And
It's been pretty good.
when you say I probably should work with my family, say more about what you meant about that. I get it, but I want to hear from you. What did that mean? I'm going to go back and I'm going to deal and work with my family.
Right. Attend holidays, fulfill obligations that normally, I didn't have for years because I was on the other side of the country. So that,
Yeah, and for me, after my family disowned me, and I was disowned in my 20s for becoming a sexual being without being married. Oh my God. And and I didn't see them. They just literally disowned me. When I decided to get back in touch with them years later, it was for me. It was because I wanted to find out my history. I wanted to be in touch with them face to face to see if I could still be myself and not become the past expectation of who I was. Does that make sense to you? Or how did that
Yeah,
play out for you?
yeah. Well, I did not feel like I was the same person. I've have other healing events in my world, and so, I am a different person. So really, I just wanted to know if they like me how I am. That's kind of what I was going for. Do they like me now?
Did you get your answer?
I did. They do. They do
Oh,
like me.
good. Oh, good.
Uh, Another
Good.
thing, when I lived there in Phoenix, and people would often say, "My sister, my brother, oh, I'm going to go do that with my brother." Oh, and I took care of people's moms, even, who had like early Alzheimer's and stuff. I would participate in the care. And so I don't know. I was longed for that. I want to say I stayed at my brother's cottage, or,
And you
my sister
do.
got me this monarch uh habitat for next summer. I wanted them to be involved in there every day.
I hear you, sweetie. And that's what the neuroscientists say is our most dominant heart's desire to belong.
Right.
And so you came back to see if you still belonged. And when I went back, there was so much violence and um, mental illness in my family that I didn't go back to see if I belonged. I went back to see, can I be my true self here? And if I can, then I can stay connected. And to the extent that I can't be true to myself, I'm not going to invest that part of myself. So it was a both
Right.
end. It's a both end. I think one of the things that you're facing now, and tell us, because not everybody was with us last week, but tell us whatever you feel you want to about how the Americans with Disabilities Act came up. And you were starting to say, until I asked for more information, you were starting to say, hey, look, I was working at Head Start. You taught there for 30 something years, and then you were doing what felt more like a desk job as a
Right.
mentor. How was that a desk job?
It was just I was following paperwork. In my classroom, I had the routine and rhythm of documentation, lesson planning, implementation. That flow was part of my world. And I didn't mind the routine of it. I liked it. And so then as a coach, I'm trying to get somebody else to do that who hasn't done it for a long time, and for they've been a teacher, for a child care provider for a long time. They've done it this way the whole time. It's been fine. Why, they're not really interested in establishing that same type of dedication
I hear
to
you,
the
girl.
paperwork.
So it was like when I was supervisor of when I was the manager of a whole group of employees at a university, I had a person say to me in a challenging way, to work with me is going to be like pushing a rope. It felt like saying, yeah, out the door.
Right.
But he was
Yeah,
telling me
that's what
his
it's like
truth.
for herding cats, or,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because, the serenity prayer says, grant me the serenity to accept that I can't change anybody else. So I hear you. When you worked with children, you saw those children growing and you saw the
right.
effect of a good lesson plan, how would that help a child? And you saw
Right.
the effect of documenting, hey, this child was doing this yesterday, but today she's doing this. When
Right.
it came to your new job, that was not what you wanted to do. And so, how did you end up testing positive for marijuana? If what you do is take marijuana at night, does it just carry over into your system until the next day?
Right. Yeah.
Uh, okay.
THC is stored in your fat, not in your water. Other drugs you can wash out. Alcohol you can wash out. It washes out each day. But marijuana is stored in your fat. And if you use marijuana a little tiny bit or a ton, it stays in your body. And it could stay up to a month in your body in the fat cells, to where when you give a sample of urine, it says you have marijuana in there,
Okay, so now
even if
what
you
was
don't use it for a month.
yeah, still it can hang out around in your fat cells. So what now let's just there's law. We got to interlace the law here because Ohio, different states have different laws, right, about
Right.
marijuana use. What about medicinal marijuana use in Ohio? What was in effect then and what's in effect now?
It became legal to use marijuana recreationally and medicinally the day that I was tested. That was the first day that the Ohioans voted to pass a law that we can use marijuana. It was there was medicinal marijuana before that, but I didn't have a card. Now I do.
Okay, so the very day that it became legal to use medicinal marijuana was the day you got tested.
Yes.
So you weren't really breaking the law. Is that
I
true?
wasn't breaking the law, but yes, I'm breaking the federal law, because federally it is incorrectly categorized as a, like heroin or other really, dangerous, more dangerous drugs, more debilitating drugs.
And the federal law, just help me like tease this out because the federal law applied to your work as a Head Start employee. Why?
Because they receive federal funds. So anyone who receives federal funds, grants from the federal government, has to participate in drug-free workplace.
You got it.
And so
So,
my company does. And so, which made them have to follow certain procedures also, which actually worked in my benefit, or is working in my benefit.
so let's just identify the crisis and how you've turned here. You're it's perfect for you being a trauma survivor. You turn a crisis into something that can be beneficial. So
Right,
the day you get tested, of course, you test positive, given what you said about
right.
marijuana hanging around in the fat cells. You get tested positive, and what happened that day as soon as they got your testing?
Well, uh, I had to sit there and wait until the lab reports came back. So the first day, I told my supervisor that I was going to fail,
Hmm?
and she said, "Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it." And so the first day, I really just sat there all day, like vibrating, like, like, I didn't, right. It was a shock, a surprise. It took me till I came home and had a puff of marijuana to be comfortable again,
Hmm.
actually. So then I just did my duties, at work, to the best of my ability, until my supervisor came back and said, "We have a disciplinary meeting at 1 o'clock. Please be here."
What happened to you when you heard that news?
Well, I knew it was coming and I was like, okay, well, we'll deal with that bridge as we cross it.
Now, if I hear you correctly, during the day, you don't use at all because you want to be present in the past
Right,
to the children, in this case, be present to the people you're coaching. And yet, when you don't use, a lot of those complex post-traumatic stress disorder behaviors return to your body,
right,
like anxiety, right?
right,
And so here you are being told by your supervisor, let's talk here. We're talking authority figures, we're talking your
right,
livelihood, we're talking your reputation, we're talking all of these things that deeply matter to who you are.
right.
And you're being called for this. How on earth did you deal with that anxiety?
Breathing. See, that's another thing I learned at Head Start is conscious discipline and breathing and staying present that way, which that's what I did. I mean, and really depended solidly on the routines that keep me safe or keep me feeling safe.
So
Uh,
what's a routine that you followed that you depended upon that day besides breathing to keep you safe?
Breathing, I have to get up and make a pot of coffee, and I already know what clothes I'm going to wear, and I warm up my car at a certain time, and I just have rituals and routines that make each part of my routine, work.
So you take care of yourself and you
Yes,
do all these steps of self-care, which you have learned over the years are things that you need. I'm just going to add that I was just working in Texas and there was a lot of stress with airplanes and delayed, it's called a travel adventure. But one of the things I learned decades ago, and that's called emotional freedom technique or tapping. Did you ever get that one?
I don't do tapping, but I rock.
Rocking. Okay. And
Right.
rocking, what does that do for you, girl?
It just helps me.
Calms you down,
Oh,
right?
right.
So for
For
me,
this
the
one.
tapping is, I was taught this by a counselor, trauma counselor, and she said, look, you're going to be touching the acupressure parts of your body. So I tap here and I tap here and I tap here and I tap here and then all these, and then this, and there, I touch all my fingers except for one. And then I touch the crown of my head. So it's about chakras, it's about energy. What it does is two things. One, hopefully it is doing what you're doing, which is to put me back in touch with the parts of my body that are getting blocked by the fear and the tension and the
Right,
anxiety, and
right.
to help me
And
step
it's,
away from
I am
that.
here. I am now, here I am right now.
Here I am. I'm right here, right now, and I'm doing
Right.
this, and this is
I'm
all I need to
okay.
focus on. I'm okay, and I don't need to be thinking about the future because I need to be focusing on this to get
Right,
this right. And that, I think that's the second thing about these practices, Denise, is that not only does it help reshape what my body's doing inside, refocus it, but it also takes my mind off what you were talking about. If you've got a ritual, that ritual says, I'm okay. As Shakespeare said, God's in God's heaven and all's right with the world. So that's how you got through that day of extreme anxiety. You took care
right.
of yourself with all of that. Okay. And so what happened next? So the bottom line is you got identified with drugs, which Ohio said you could use, but federal government said no.
Right.
And how did you feel going? So you went into that meeting. Tell us about that. What'd you find out? What did you learn?
There's a union representative there who I thanked her for being there to represent me. And she said, oh, it's just standard practice. And,
Okay.
I greeted the woman that's in charge of human
Employee
resources.
assistance.
I've worked with her before on other, I know her.
Sure.
So I greeted her.
Yep.
And then they just told me what's happening. You're going to be suspended for 4 days. Then you go to a Then after that 4 days, you can use vacation time or sick time. They explain the procedures. And then also right after the meeting, I went and because they sent out the procedures the next day. So after I was tested, the human resources sent out the procedures to everybody. So I had
Oh,
printed them already, so I knew what the procedures were.
okay, good, good.
Right. And but they just went through the procedures, which I have to meet with a EAP, employee assistance professional, who
Mhm.
I don't know who pays them, state of Ohio, or I don't know, but it's a procedure.
Yes.
So I went to her, and because of her vacation, my shutdown, I had the whole month of December off. I met
Mm.
her. She gave me 3 things that I should do. Uh,
You did them
One
all.
was right, counsel, psychiatrist, and a drug class online about drug addiction. And so after her vacation and time, a month off already, I went and visit her again and told her I did that, I did that, I did that. And so
Mhm.
then we talked for like an hour about what this decision means, how, you know, it's pretty complex decision to make, because it
And
includes,
can you describe to people listening, well, when you say this decision, is it as monumental as deciding what to do with the rest of your life?
yeah,
Is it
kind of, or at least with the next year. So do I want to start the rest of my life now? Or do I want to start the rest of my life a year from now?
okay? And if
Those
you
were kind
put
of the two
those are the
options.
two decisions, and if you put
Right.
off for a year, you can't use this medication that helps you deal with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Is that right?
That's
So
correct.
so how could you do that? I
So
mean,
I
did you
would
really?
have to go off marijuana for the next year and sacrifice my medicine so I can work. So I just, waited. I'm still not, I still haven't written a letter of resignation, but I am, really leaning towards that I don't want to give up my medicine for a year
So Denise, if you
to get
were
paid.
a, I hear you, sweetie, if you were a diabetic, you had to take insulin,
Right.
and you were being asked to stop taking insulin, could you even entertain that?
No. And I really can't either. Although, I went to a psychiatrist.
Okay.
That was one of my, it was a necessary to get my PTSD
Diagnosis, right?
diagnosis so
Yeah.
that I could get my medical card, which, really is $200, which you don't need a medical card because recreation is legal also. But I just wanted to do it,
Hmm. But this is not
So
just recreational. This is
no,
medication.
I'm not using it recreationally. I'm not, trying to get
Yeah.
high and leave the world. I'm trying to
Right.
quiet my mind so I can enjoy my world.
See, now that's crucial, Denise, because a disability is something that takes away our capacity to enjoy life.
Right,
And post traumatic stress disorder, when I look back at my life, just thinking about you, I said, so many important moments in my life were affected because I had complex post traumatic stress disorder.
right,
So many important decisions I made were made because I was afraid rather
right,
than because I felt confident.
right.
Um,
And
very,
even to think straight, think not emotionally from the emotional place, but to think from the executive branch here.
yes.
you
Sweetie,
know,
I
like,
hear you because here's what I found out, and I remind myself of this a lot. When complex post-traumatic stress disorder takes anybody over, takes me over, my executive function, which as you know, and I think our listeners know, the executive function, it's the most recently developed part of our brain. It's also called the prefrontal cortex, and it has the function of helping me make wise decisions, make choices that are healthy, be creative, be generous, claim my sense of humor, claim my strengths. I mean, this is a really important part of my brain. And it's no accident that the ancients used to say that we have an inner eye right here.
right,
And when I was in my treatment center for codependency, I had a roommate who was there for substance addictions. And she would every night massage her third eye and say, I do this as I'm trying to, and even just doing it, I can feel the relief of it. Why I'm talking about this is that the amygdala gland, which takes over right away, boom, in people like you, people like me with complex post traumatic stress disorder, that gland is so primitive, it has a lot of power, and it tells my whole system to spurt out adrenaline. Once the adrenaline comes, I'm all pumped up to survive. I'm not
right,
thinking straight. And it also sources cortisol, and cortisol is a depressant, and that's no fun. It's like I can't do anything, but I've got to survive. That's it. That's it. And so what here's the data that I learned that helps me a lot when I'm tending toward being hard on myself, Denise. I say that action of the amygdala gland removes the capacity, removes my ability to access that healing part of my brain by 90 to 95%. No
right,
wonder I can't think straight. No wonder I can't remember your name. No wonder I can't think of a word.
right,
Again, beating myself up is the way that we learn to take the blame on ourselves, but it's not a fault thing. So what I
right.
hear saying is, I mean, I'm impressed you could get through all this stuff with your brain that can get flattened out like that. And you took notes, you did exactly what you had to do. What I want to get down to, if you're willing to, is this. Are you struggling with wondering if you are a disabled person?
No, I have a lot of coping skills, and I don't think I'm disabled.
What
I
would it?
think I'm better able, like I can be more empathetic, I can be a kinder person in the world and a brighter light in the world because of the coping skills that I practice.
Mhm.
And
That
now that I'm
is,
off work, I'm doing an hour of yoga every day. Man, I got positive energy like a waterfall coming everywhere.
and that's going to benefit who?
Me and
And
everybody.
when you're benefited, then all those children and all those babies that you do story time with are going to get the best of you,
The
not
goodness,
just
right,
part of you, the goodness in you. This is powerful because the word it used to be called handicap. Remember when people were called handicapped?
right.
When somebody was handicapped, what did you think of?
There's something wrong with them.
Yep. Yep. It's no accident that I do a presentation called What's Right with You? Because we're so familiar with asking, what's wrong with that child? What's wrong? What's the diabetes? All that stuff. But disability at least was a step up from handicap. Nonetheless, what we talked about last week, Denise, is that the government has to give you the label of being disabled if you want to receive compensation to be able to keep going. Now, how do you deal with that? Or what's going on inside of you when you weigh that?
Right.
And I don't mean to
I
shame you.
can get
Be a
like
lot of shame.
$240 more per month now if I am disabled. If
Right.
I wait for, if I retire right now, I can get like 1,300. If I retire at 66, I can get 200 more. If I retire at 66 and 8 months, I can get a little bit more, $100 more per month.
And to you, that $100 makes a big difference, right?
Right, right,
Because you're saying you rent a room and it's $400 a month.
right,
And after you take the $400 out of 1,200, you're down to what, 800 for everything else you need, car, gas, food, medication, self-care.
right,
Yeah, you're living close, right? You're living
right,
close to the line.
right.
So those few $100 could make a difference. What so what are you thinking? You're still weighing the odds?
No, I think I'm not going to get disability
Okay,
because what happens, what typically, if you apply for disability, you become, it's denied the first time,
right.
typically. And
Right.
post-traumatic stress disorder has only recently been
Right.
added to that potential of getting a disability. So chances are it will be delayed and denied. And so once you're denied, then you have to reapply and get a lawyer, which I'm not getting a lawyer because that's money. So,
Would your work pay for that? I mean, is there anybody you'd have to cover that yourself, is what you're saying?
right.
So there's no legal aid in Ohio that might help with that.
There probably is a place that I could apply to get legal aid. And actually, most of these lawyers that do Social Security disability claims wait to be paid until you get, because what happens if you're denied, you get paid retroactive for whenever you applied. So
Okay.
they take their payment out of that
All right, girl. So that makes
typically. So I
sense.
could do it, which means waiting for 2 years. You end up waiting for 2 years to collect anything,
Well,
which
so
I'm
if
going to
you,
try to wait 2 years to collect social, or a year and a half to collect Social Security at least. So I get a little more too. So I don't know. It's
no, you're doing
six.
great, sweetie. I think you do know a lot because what you're telling me, you're helping me, you're educating me about, look, here's my choice. If I go a year and a half, then I will get more money from my Social Security. Social Security, I just want to say 8,000% clear, is something you have taken out of your
Every
income
paycheck, every year I work.
every
Yeah.
paycheck every year when you could have used the money that went into taking care of you in the future. So that's your
Right.
money,
It is
right?
my money. Yeah. All of it. Yeah. It's weird that we have to jump through, be 66 in 8 months to collect your full Social
And yet,
Security.
if you do that, if you wait, so right now you're 65 and your birthday was in December,
September.
September. Okay, so you got a while to wait. So if you wait 1 year and 6 months, is that it, Denise? Or 1 year, 8 months? 1 year and 6 months, your monthly payment will go up and to a place where it makes a difference,
Right. Like
right?
$232 or something. I didn't do the exact math, but it's a
It's
lot.
okay. Okay, it is a lot, and to you that would make a big difference.
Right.
Um, I mean, what if God forbid, but this woman from whom the lovely lady from who rents you a room,
Right.
for $400, what if she needs to sell her house or becomes herself disabled or something? I
Right.
don't
That happened before to me that the person had to sell their house. I rented the upstairs and she had a reverse mortgage. And
Oh
then
dear,
so she had to get rid of the house in order to
survive.
survive. I don't know. So yeah, that did happen. It does happen. It could happen.
So what we're talking about here is you're talking about basic life survival. And
Right.
what you're having to choose, what you're choosing between is, do I go with Social Security, which would give me this amount of money in a year and 6 months, or do I go with disability? And what you've learned since we last talked is go with disability. You're right. The chances are you're going to be denied the first time around. So at the best, you wouldn't get, even if you did qualify, you wouldn't collect disability for about 2 years. Is that
Two
right?
years. Yep.
Now, and how much more would it be if it were disability than if it were Social Security?
Disabilities, more than what I get by about 40 some dollars if I wait 66 and 8 months. So disability is a little more than that.
Okay. Okay. But it's not like $1,000. It's
No, no.
and disability, when we look at the Americans with Disabilities Act, which came about in our lifetimes, it wasn't there when we
Yes.
were born. It's like 1990. And
Yeah,
it
my
took
degree is
a
actually special ed, so I have been in
yes,
interesting in, the disabilities aspect since college, 1982 or whatever.
right. And it's like Social Security. We pay into Social Security. It's our money that we're
Right,
giving the government power to use. But when it's our time to get the money back, it's our money that we paid in. So it's not
right.
like some social benefit. It's like it
Like
one plus one.
companies used to provide that, called a retirement or a pension, but
Yes,
they quit doing that.
they do. And so we got to take care of ourselves, right? Or they're
Right,
self-employed. I'm
right,
self-employed. So this is how I took
right.
care
Which
of
I
myself.
was self-employed several of my years, but I always paid into Social Security every time, even when I was
Exactly.
self-employed.
Right. And I paid into, when I was employed by an organization, I would pay into an IRA. So it was, the retirement account. And that I'm really grateful for that. What I'm thinking here is that there are these labels, and that's what I want to address because there's a label. If I say I'm disabled, there's a label. If I say I'm just getting Social Security, we all get Social Security. That's
Right.
not a bad, evil label, but how would you feel if you said to people, well, I'm on disability, I've got a disability, and then they, oh, how would that be different than just saying I'm getting Social
I
Security?
retired, right. They're saying just I retired. I mean, you can say whatever I can say whatever I want. And but I wouldn't mind saying I'm disabled. I mean, I love disabled people. My mom tells me one of our family stories is that I always brought home the
Mhm.
hurt puppies or the
Stray cat.
right. I always brought home whoever I brought home, something was with them. That's what
Mhm.
my mom used to say, you know.
And what does that
So
say? What does that say about you, do you think?
I think I'm neurodiverse myself, and I have always been open to people who are diverse.
Would it be, and you don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but would it be embarrassing anyway for you to be known as a person with a disability?
I don't think so. In fact, I'm more inclined now to say, I think I'm neurodiverse.
Mhm.
I really do say that so much more now than in the last year than I ever have because I think I am. I'm a non-reader, basically. I don't read books. I do read Facebook. I can deal with a
A little
paragraph,
bit. Mhm.
but if I see it the post is this long, I might skip it.
Yep, I hear you because your brain just doesn't compute that way, right?
Right. It doesn't receive information after a couple few
Mhm.
paragraphs.
So break it into tidbits and you get it.
Right.
I can read that. Then I can do something else. Then I can read this. I get that.
Right.
I'm here's the challenge that we have, those of us that are trauma survivors, and that's what I want to focus on here. Trauma survivors' brains develop differently. Now, I sat with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, the guy who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. I worked really hard to get on a panel with him. And my question for him, Denice, especially for those of us in early childhood, was how do children who are traumatized, how do our brains develop differently because of the trauma? And he did not want to answer that question. And so I quickly switched around. I mean, I had submitted that question in advance and it had been curated and approved, and so I'm ready to ask it. But this was the day that we were on this panel that the Ukraine got violated, it got attacked. And so I said, look, let me reflect. Let me reflect. And in the meantime, what if we look, trauma survivor talking here. What if we take a minute out of this podcast? What if we take a minute and just have a moment of silence out of respect for the people of the Ukraine? Great idea, he said. So we all went silent, during which time I did pray for the people of the Ukraine. But then I said, okay, sweetie, he's a great expert who wrote this powerful book on the brain and trauma. He's not going to answer the question I need to have answered for those of us in early childhood. So what he did with it instead was, and I got this information, he said two things. Both were helpful. He said 80% of people that are traumatized take that secret to the grave. That doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise you either, right? We keep it secret because we're ashamed. It's like, oh my God, we get labeled and I can't tell the family secret. The other thing he said is, look at the vast majority. Well, he said, then he looked at me and he said, so how did you survive your childhood? I said, one of the things that really helped me was to develop a sense of humor. I was the only one in my family with a sense of humor. And then I wrote a lot and became a writer. Anyway, he said, look at the high frequency of people who are trauma survivors who become creative people. And I see you, Denice, as a creative person. You have found your way to a genius. I think you're ingenious about how you can connect with every child. And now you do it through your story times of reading to those kids and they get it. And in my case, I chose to do what my brain could do.
Right.
And after a while, I just said, I can't do that. I think if I had had math teachers that understood that female brains see math differently, I could have done better with math because I was advanced a couple of years in math because I was good as a kid. But by the time I got to be a teenager, my brain wasn't processing that stuff. What the hell was calculus about? No clue.
Right.
No clue. But what I'm saying is, what I want to ask is, did you decide there are some things my brain's just not going to be able to do?
Yep. There's some things that I don't like to do. And if I can get someone to do them for me, not in a manipulative way, but in a barter way,
Yes.
more like, if I can get you to write the documentation and enter it into the computer, I will sit with the children, you
Yes.
know? So,
Exactly.
that's how I did it.
And
That's
if Denice, you can talk with the parent and help the parent feel comfortable, then your team teacher doesn't have to deal with a parent that she thinks is
right.
obnoxious, right? So
Right.
a lot of the human skills, those are so Dr. Judith Herman described us as in this way. She said, children with trauma have developed remarkable creative capacities. Do you believe that?
I do.
So tell me one of your remarkable creative capacities.
I can make something out of nothing. I can make anything out of nothing, out of, well, I never have nothing. That's the problem. I do have a lot of different crafts, a lot of different craft and art supplies. I have stuff around me. And if I want to make something, I can make it, you know?
And if you're in a classroom with children or you're outside with children and all you've got are what nature gives you, have
I
everything
have
you need,
everything. I can
right?
make what I have all I need.
I hear you. And it's a similar thing with me. I learned in law school that even if I didn't know what I was going to say, I could use this technique, which is, well, there are 3 points I want to make. Now I would have no idea what the 3 points were, but
Right,
I would get people's attention and it would help focus my mind. So, and I could always come up with the first one. So I say, when the first point is this, and then I'd be jumping ahead and I'd get to the second point and I'd finally pull out a third point, even if I pulled it out of the
right,
atmosphere. And it worked. But what I'm saying is,
right.
you looked at the outside world with a child and said, we got everything we need. And I looked at my creative brain and said, I can do this. This is something I can do. But when it comes to learning technology, that's really hard and slow for me. So I now barter with or hire other people to do that stuff for
Right,
me.
right. That was one of the real blessings of going to the coach job.
Yes.
My two coworkers were, 30 years old and 32 years old. And so they taught me, because I never even copied and pasted. Well, I do know how to copy and paste. I made flyers before and for story time and whatnot, but uh, they scanned, like I didn't know how to scan. I didn't know how to properly fully use my email. And so my coworkers taught me a lot of that.
Yeah, and I still need to learn some of this. I'm still learning how to scan. I get it and then I forget it. But what's the real deal here today for this program is, how do I and how do you, as a trauma survivor, we own that. We own that we were traumatized. I own that traumatization affected the way my brain works. My brain can
Yes.
shut down. It just shuts down. And anxiety ruled my life for years. Is there anything else you would say about how trauma affects you as an adult?
It makes me, I probably avoid more things than a typical person.
Mhm. For example,
Going here, going there, or trying new things, maybe, I kind of
mhm.
rely on what I know.
I hear you. I was so anxious at one point. I had trouble driving over bridges. I didn't want, and going up high has been really hard for me sometimes. Those fears, those phobias are part of the trauma as well.
Right.
So you said you brought home the stray cats. You said the stray puppies, the herding puppies, and that you have an affinity for people who are otherwise able. But have you seen stereotypes of disabled people that really stop you in your tracks and worry you?
Well, yeah, because like people don't believe me. Interestingly, I have found when I say, yeah, I think I'm neurodiverse actually, and people are like, oh no, you are not. You couldn't possibly be.
And why did
I find that very, I don't know. It's weird
because
because they think I'm smart or and they so that and so if you're disabled, you're not smart. That's kind of what I get, but I'm not sure if that's
girl,
how
I
they
think you're nailing it. When I think of my son, who is often visibly neurodiverse, he takes it on the chin. He walks into a store and people look at him awry. He opens his mouth and people look at him. He he educated me about this about 10 years ago. Mom, you don't know what it's like. I said, tell me all about it. And he did. And every time people look at him like you're disabled. And
Right.
you and I can pass really well.
Right.
We pass because we can emphasize our strengths and use the strengths to earn
Right. We've
our
we've learned
livelihoods.
how. Right.
We have learned how to pass. And yet, when I identify myself as having complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's a disability, that sometimes, Denice, takes courage.
Yeah.
And why does it take courage? Because the stereotype that there's something wrong with me or I
Right.
wouldn't diss something
Right.
puts me in the category of less than.
Right.
And I already know that I was raised as a less than. Who wants to be reminded of
Right.
that?
That's what our culture definitely wants to put us in. But for me, we need all the types of learners. We all have something, the people that did so well in elementary school, the visual learners that
Yes.
learned from their visual teachers, and always got A's and B's or whatever, they love an auto mechanic to come and fix their car. But yet it took that auto mechanic until he was, 25 years old to even realize that he's smart too.
Yes. Yeah.
We're tactile people are smart a different way, and we all need each other.
I loved when I lived in Europe and there was much more respect for the artisan, for the person who used his or her hands to create something. It was like, and doctors were not above everybody. Doctors were like just another profession that was important. But in this country, we have all this status stuff. But
Right.
I'll start to wrap up here by saying that when I was in Singapore teaching early childhood leaders that I got this awful RSV, the respiratory syncytial virus. I got hospitalized.
I
And
remember when you were there.
yeah, honey, it was no fun. And I befriended the head of infectious diseases. We became buddies, and he would come in every morning and say, "This is like sitting with you is like having a cup of coffee." I thought, this is great. But it was also a teaching hospital where all these people would come with him. And at one point, one morning, he and I were talking, and I said, "Well, look, just want to remind you, I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it comes up particularly in a gagging response. If anybody approaches my face or my mouth with something foreign to me, we got to talk this through first so I can prepare myself. Because if you just come at me with something, I'm going to rebel." And
Gag.
and I know why that is. That's from the sexual abuse that I had as a kid.
Right.
Here's what happened, and I wrote about this in my book. A woman, I don't even know what her position was, but she came back and said, "Could I talk with you?" And I said, "Oh, yes, please." And here's what she said to me, Denise. She said, "We have a locked ward here for people with post-traumatic stress disorder."
Right.
I said, "Thanks very much. Let's sit down and talk about this." But there it was. There it was. If
Right.
I label myself, her question is, why on earth would I ever label myself like
Right.
that?
Right.
Were you
Like
facing
a
some of that?
like almost a threat. Like what? Why would you bring that up?
Yes. It's like your friend saying to you, "You're not disabled. You're one of us."
Right.
We become different when we're disabled.
Right. Other.
Other. We become other, and people forever have had trouble dealing with other. And not only that, the worst is like in Hitler times, if you were other, you were annihilated.
Right.
I know people today that don't want to identify as Jewish because of the horrid, horrid history. And I
Right.
think those of us who are neurodiverse, pleasant term, isn't it? Back in my day, the R word was used. Remember
Right.
the
My day too. I mean, my original certificate is physically and mentally retarded.
the department that served my son in Massachusetts for years was the DMR, the Department of Mental Retardation.
Yep.
They changed that. But I think, and we need to pull this together, Denice, but last week when we talked, you were like debating what do I do? And part of that was, do I want to be labeled? I
Right,
don't, for you, being diverse is who you are.
right,
It's your strength. It's not a weakness.
right. I agree. And uh, but I'm not going to take that path because of the delay in getting money.
Yes. So for very practical reasons, you're going to go with Social Security. Real
Right.
practical question. Does that mean you cannot use medical marijuana, or can you use medical marijuana at the end of the day if you continue to work for a year
If
and a
I
half?
if I work for the company that I can
Yes.
work for myself. I'm going to be self-employed basically.
Okay.
I go back and work for my company. No.
Okay. So now that's discrimination, isn't it?
Yeah,
If you were the diabetic and you had to take insulin, reasonable accommodations would be made so you could inject that insulin. But
right. In a
because
safe place in the office where I have
privacy,
privacy and a refrigerator to keep it the correct temperature.
you got it. And yet, same thing, neurochemical disability that we've got when we've got complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And what we're doing is simply getting the balance back.
Right. What that I learned how to dose myself and
Yes.
how to use, not abuse.
Yes. Yes. You're not doing it to escape from the world. You're doing it to be in the world,
To
being
be
your best self.
present in the world, right? And
That's what you
not,
said right up front. And I believe you, girl. Is there anything, we need to end, but is there anything else you would love for our listeners who are neurodiverse people mostly? Would anything like to speak to their hearts or say to their souls as you wrap
every
this program?
every type of learner and every type we all have something to contribute. And I hope that we can be appreciated for contributing and that you can be appreciated for whatever it is you have to contribute to.
I'm going to support that 100%. Remember this painter called El Greco, Spanish
Yes,
painter? He had an astigmatism in his eyes, which meant, his characters are all really, they've got these elongated limbs. That's the way he saw people. That's just the
right,
way he saw people. And so he was just being him.
right.
It's a disability, but to him it was an ability. I see the whole world as being otherwise able. And
Yep, I agree. I do
the
too.
the healthier the world becomes, the more each child that comes into the Head Start classroom is appreciated for who she is,
Right.
right?
And the more variety that we allow to be typical. I mean, that really honestly typical is all the variety. There isn't
Right.
just this little pie piece that's good. All the pieces are good.
You got it, girlfriend. Denice, I love talking with you, and I hope you will come back. This has been a real helpful exploration about neurodiversity and complex post traumatic stress disorder. To you and me, it gives us gifts, and yet it carries the cost of anxiety.
Right.
And we need to find ways to deal with that anxiety, whether I'm doing this or you're doing the breathing.
Right.
We're taking care of ourselves. And I'm grateful that we live in times when we've got some of those practices. So I love you, girl. I'm really glad you
I love you
joined me. And I
too.
hope thanks, hon. I hope come on back next week, whenever.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can come every week now, probably
Oh,
again, like I
man.
was.
So we can talk about other stuff. We can talk
Yep,
about a whole bunch of stuff and keep us posted on what's going on with you. This has been a powerful thing. A
it
powerful
has a
thing.
life-changing event.
You got it, girlfriend. Okay. I will see you next week. I hope.
All
Fairly
right.
well.